It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil, Amok to you. Welcome to our show. This is going to be the show for the next couple days because, for a number of reasons, I'm kind of bummed out by the whole political process. You know, Michigan was kind of a bummer for a lot of different reasons on both the Democrats and the Republican side. You got Mitch McConnell stepping down today for the Republicans, which should be a good thing, really, if they had someone better to come up and take his place. But Mitch McConnell, who is as Machiavellian as it gets, he got out-Trumped by Trump. And I guess he feels like, hey, the seismic shift is happening in politics. I mean, it's happened long ago. It happened about, maybe when Trump first won. But now people are saying, uh-oh, here it is. So I'm bummed out for those reasons. I'm cheered by the fact that I am doing my show coming up at in Fresno. Now, I'm not saying you should drive to Fresno. I'm not saying that, we live here in Oregon or Washington or Nevada or New York. Emil's saying drive to Fresno, California. Well, don't you want some fresh raisins? Just the idea of fresh raisins seems like fresh raisins. I mean, they're old. These are like less old or older raisins. No, I'm not saying you should drive to Fresno, but I am going to be at the Fresno Rogue Festival. If you go to my Facebook page, Emil Guillermo or emilguillermo.media, here's my little poster here. Emil Amok, Lost NPR host, married to PETA, and other untold stories from an American Filipino life. That version of my show is going to be at the Fresno Rogue Festival, or as they say in Fresno, the Rogu Festival. No, they don't say Rogu. I mean, they might say that in Delano. No, they're not. Delano's a good town north of Fresno. They say that in Fireball, Texas, or Fireball. I just call it Texas. It's California. Now, the Rogue Festival, I'll be at the Lotus Room, 626 East Olive Avenue in Fresno, Saturday, March 2nd at 2 p.m. You can catch the matinee. Yeah, before you get your AARP discount, at the Denny's, wherever you go, Golden Corral. And they're not vegan enough for me, but I mean, before you can go to my show at 2 o'clock at the Lotus Room on Olive Street in Fresno on Saturday, then Saturday night again, March 2nd at 9:30 p.m. You can say, hey, I've taken a nap. I'll see Emil at night at 9:30 and see if he's taken a nap. On Sunday, March 3rd, I come back at 2 p.m. at the Lotus Room. And people are already saying, Emil, we're going to be there. We're going to be at that Sunday one. Because we've given up church. And even if you went to church, you can still see me Sunday, March 3rd at 2 p.m. Then I'm back March 7th at 5:30 and Saturday, March 9th at 5 p.m. at the Lotus Room in Fresno. Well, come meditate with me. Go to roguefestival.ticketleap.com and look for Emil Amok Guillermo. So roguefestival.ticketleap.com/Emil Amok Guillermo. Yeah, that's where you get the tickets. And it's a fun show. It's my show about being Filipino, being the Lost NPR host. I talk about NPR. You NPR fan, I'll mention something about Bob Edwards. Got a Bob Edwards story. And then I talk about, being vegan and being married to PETA, and then these other untold stories, which make this kind of like a, John Leguizamo's Latin History for Dummies, only more Filipino. We were involved in the trade, Spanish-American War. Although the United States did buy the Philippines, $20 million it cost. And so I talk about all the history. I don't call you a dummy for knowing. I just say, oh, you're ignorant. You don't know Filipino history. But it's American history. And so that's coming up this weekend for me. So now I say all this because, number one, I'm going to repeat this, and I want you to see it. And if you see subsequent or previous shows, this is show 660, but see show 559 and 558. I also talk about the article I did at Kings River Life, which is it's the cultural zine in the Fresno area, kingsriverlife.com. And I tell why I'm going to the Rogue. So check that out, okay? I kick off this show, even though I sounded depressed because of all the political stuff that happened on Tuesday. But I mention my show because one of the reasons why I do a show like I do is because of this guy who I just heard died about an hour ago. I mean, Richard Lewis, the neurotic comic and Curb Your Enthusiasm actor. This is a report, Hollywood Reporter, died at age 76 about an hour ago. And it's so depressing. But I mention it not to be depressed about Richard's passing, but because he's one of the inspirations for doing my show. He's one of the, I mean, I would never say, if you ask me, who are your comic heroes? You know, of course, I'd have to say Pryor and Carlin and, you know, those guys, right? Steve Martin, really, Steve Martin in the 70s. Untouchable. He was the best. But Richard Lewis, in terms of pure style, he was kind of my guy, you know. And I didn't go into comedy. I went into journalism. Same difference, Emil. No. And then I sort of went into it. I went into theater, the theater aspect, doing one-man shows like my solo show. But I do a lot of comedy, and I've done stand-up. There's stand-up parts in my show. And when I do the stand-up, the person I think of as a performer, the person in my mind I don't have Pryor in my head. I don't have Carlin. I don't have Steve Martin in my head. The guy I have in my head, who I'm almost emulating, is Richard Lewis. And so, you know, I've lately become a fan of, took me 12 years, but I've become a fan of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Maybe because I was looking for Curve Your Enthusiasm, and I never found it on my list of things to watch. Oh, it's Curb? All these years it was Curve. It's not Curve, like, you know, that where the Asians are and the academic curve. No, Curb. Oh, okay. Like Curb Your Dog. Yeah. No, I just started liking it, watching it. He was in the last episode, and which is good because I know that there have been stories about his health over the last year or so. So this is no surprise to his friends, but you know, you always thought, oh, well, he'll hang in there. He'll be okay. But the news hit today. Richard Lewis, master of self-deprecating comedy, who whined his way to stardom with stand-up TV specials, a sold-out concert at Carnegie Hall, and turns on Anything But Love and Curb Your Enthusiasm, has died. He was 76, which is, you know, this is the time. It's sad. Lewis died peacefully at his home in Los Angeles Tuesday night after suffering a heart attack, his publicist told The Hollywood Reporter. The actor and comic revealed in April that he had been living with Parkinson's and was retiring from stand-up. So I guess that's what when I heard about his health. I heard about his health maybe a year earlier. And, Richard with his, the blazer and the long hair and all his Letterman appearances, the whole neurotic energy. In fact, when I do shows, when I do my show, when I do anything on stage, the guy who comes to mind when I am going way too fast for my own good, when I'm not really, when I'm just like going amok, as it were, the model was always Richard Lewis. So I'm sad. I'm saddened to hear that he's passed. He said it on social media before wrapping up Curb. He said, "For the last 3.5 years, I've had sort of a rocky time, and so we had hints all throughout that something was up. He was dealing with his diagnosis while they were filming season 12, and I'm just glad that I finally discovered. I mean, I've seen him on the show, but he's in season 12. He's in that second or third episode, one of the ones that are up now. And you always thought, oh, he's gonna be okay, but probably not. So we get the word today that he's passed. I did see him live. I've never met him. I saw him numerous times on television, of course, his Letterman appearances. But I saw Richard live at Cobb's in San Francisco. Cobb's a big room, big. You got to fill that room. He filled it. He had the room filled. And, he had this thing about having this big sheet of, I guess it was his notes, his something. And he'd come up with that. He'd put it down and, behind him, and he'd go consult. I feel like that sometimes. I'm doing my show this week, and I'm thinking, I'm in honor of Richard. I'm going to bring my big cheat sheet with me. I'm going to, it's like my security blanket. Because you reach a certain age and you forget what you're going to say, or you're not in the moment. Oh, I'm going to go back in the moment. I'm going to go back to my Richard sheet. Don't call it a cheat sheet. Call it my Richard sheet. Anyway, I really loved the guy. I saw him in person that time a couple of years ago. Had to be about, I can't believe it's been about maybe 5 years ago. It was before COVID. At Cobb's in San Francisco. Totally satisfying. And it's not so much the jokes, right? It was the jokes coming out of him, but because he was delivering it in the Richard Lewis way, right? And then because he'd nervously pace and he'd run his fingers through his hair and he'd wave his arms. And it was just kind of like, I don't know what it was, but that was what was a model for me instinctively as I saw him through the years and I'd seen him in person. It was always Richard Lewis. It was, no other comic who I admired, who I'd say, oh, I like them. No one else, had that kind of, had the style that Richard did. Certainly Pryor had his own style. George Carlin, Steve Martin, all the ones that I mentioned who I would say, oh, those are like in my head, that they are the ones I try to emulate. And then on a solo basis, then I hear people like Spalding Gray and Mike Daisey, and those are, my solo show is kind of like a marriage of all those things. But it was Richard. Richard was the guy who I'm most connected, whatever it is that I do, my amokness was Richard. So I remember him. And pray for his family, his friends. Keep him in our thoughts. Sad. I mean, I was already pretty depressed because if you saw Tuesday night, I was editing a podcast before I get into the depressing parts. An interesting podcast with Kip Anderson, who did the documentaries What the Health and Seaspiracy and Cowspiracy on Netflix. He has a new one called Christspiracy, which opens up March 20th. And you got to get your tickets at Christspiracy.com. Mention PETA, PETA, and you get a discount. Listen to the podcast, and you'll see how enticed you are. But I was editing that last night and putting it up and feeling okay. I'm preparing for my show, like I said, at the Fresno Rogue this weekend. And as I was, I'm going amok in my own way. And actually, I was thinking about Richard, really. Although, it wasn't like consciously thinking about him, but as I was saying, that he was kind of like the Amok model for me. The Filipino neurosis came from Richard Lewis. And all my, my close friend, mentor of mine shares the surname. So, I hear the name Lewis and it has a certain meaning, deep meaning with me. So anyway, all right. So last night, Tuesday, the election, already pretty depressing. Mostly because Joe Biden, he wins, but there are all these uncommitted voters out there saying, sending him a message. So, the Democratic Party is feeling, that generational shift. Here, people mostly in Michigan, the Michigan voters are upset about the Gaza Israel stance that Joe Biden has taken. And they went out and voted. They went out and voted maybe 2-3 times more than the activists figured they would. They went out and were very vocal, and Joe Biden has to pay attention to that. So it was Biden first, uncommitted second. Marianne Williamson, I didn't see the full poll, but according to reports, she finished third ahead of Dean Phillips. And if you've heard my show, I've been telling people that, hey, you ought to be looking at Marianne Williamson, because Marianne Williamson she's got something to say. She's more than just some kind of, a lot of people want to, say she's some kind of, woo-woo kind of spiritualist and, put her in the same ballpark as the astrologists. But no, she's deeper. She is maybe what the country can use right now to bring us together and heal us. But look, this is not necessarily an endorsement, but I got something on the email from her supporters saying that she is unsuspending. She says, as of today, I am unsuspending my presidential campaign. All of us have noticed America's political dynamics are moving in a disturbing direction. Donald Trump's power is on the incline and President Biden's is on the decline. More and more people are saying the quiet part out loud, that despite the fact that the president deserves credit for many of his accomplishments, he is clearly a weak candidate to defeat Donald Trump in 2024. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all of that, but I think that just her announcement that she's going to unsuspend is a big deal if you're looking for alternatives. Because look who she beat. She beat Dean Phillips. Dean Phillips, who gave up his congressional seat to run, and he's like same old, same old. And people are saying, no, we're not going with you, Dean Phillips, which I think is probably right. You look at Marianne Williamson, she's putting together a coalition of people. She says, my ability to arouse in Americans the angels of our better nature is the most powerful antidote to Trump's dark and authoritarian vision. I suspended my campaign because we were losing the horse race. But there is something much bigger than the horse race that's at stake here. In the words of Muhammad Ali, when the mission is right, the odds don't matter. That's a good quote. We cannot sit idly by while the DC political class sleepwalks this country into disaster. Too many have followed the directives of the status quo for too long, but we are awakening now. We are ready to act, to take the wheel of history into our hands and turn it into another direction. I read that and I thought, oh, well, thank goodness. I hope other people hear her and other people, pay attention to her, because she's been dissed by the media and she deserves to be heard. And the fact that she has finished above Dean Phillips, who was out there campaigning, Dean Phillips, who is Mr. Traditional, but wants to be Mr. Young Traditionalist. He's got no traction. Uncommitted beat both of them. But Marianne Williamson, who had suspended her campaign, beat Dean Phillips. So take a look at Marianne. And, I think Biden's still a strong candidate. But yesterday in Michigan showed that he didn't exactly do anything about the voices who are speaking loudly about their disapproval of his Gaza policy. He says maybe there's going to be a ceasefire as soon as this week, but people are angry. And it's the generational shift within the Democrats. Now, we know that's happening with the Democrats. I mean, we know it's happening with the Republicans. We just haven't really perceived it yet as strongly as yesterday with the Democrats. With the Republicans, we know. Look, there are more Republicans. Here's one thing that you should be freaked out about. There are more Republicans going out to vote than Democrats. A lot of them voting for Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley did not win, did not beat Donald Trump yesterday. She came in second, a bad second, about, less than 40% of the vote. Still a sizable number. But what's happening with the Republican Party is they're going through their generational shift. It's been obvious from the beginning of the primary season. But I was listening to Nikki Haley in an interview yesterday, and she kind of laid it out. And if you listen to her, any sane person starts thinking, man, I didn't realize I liked Ronald Reagan as much as I did. I mean, here's the thing. I grew up in California with Reagan as governor. He did a number of things to screw up my public high school education, my public education, the way the schools are funded, or lost funds because of adjustments to the budget, namely Prop 13, property tax, reform that really gutted the budgets of public schools. I mean, there were other things that he did, cutting support to people who needed more public assistance. So I have no soft spot in my heart for Reagan. But I look what's happening to the Republican Party. And man, when you consider their options, the Republican Party of Trump or the Republican Party of Reagan, and neither are good options. But the Republican Party of Trump is a road to who knows where. At best, it's his own idiocy. At worst, it's his own idiocy assuming the mantle of authoritarian dictator. That would be the worst scenario. All of which makes Ronald Reagan, Cold Warrior, seem like maybe not such a bad alternative if we had to deal with Republicans. And knowing that as a Californian, I know how bad the Republicans under Reagan were. But I was listening to Nikki Haley yesterday in this interview, and it's a reason why she's staying in. She wants to provide that kind of alternative to people. And frankly, I think it's kind of an interesting thing that she's not going to win, but she's going to, if you want to vote for an adult in the room, Haley and you're a Republican, Haley says, I'm there for you, which I think is good. But the Republicans have to get together. Otherwise, their standard bearer is going to be Donald Trump. And what's going to happen to all these Lincoln Project guys who are so anti-Trump? The Republican Party is just, I'm nostalgic for the old Republican Party. I never thought I'd ever say that. Here, I'm saying that. The old Republican, not the Trump Republican Party. Generational shift. And so I was dealing with that this morning. Nikki Haley saying, look, we've got, no one's talking about conservatism. No one's talking about, budget discipline. Trump built up the budget deficit. He had out of control spending. He didn't solve anything on the border. He didn't solve anything with immigration. He's telling Putin to go in and attack allies. The whole world is not what we thought. I mean, it's a different changing world, and Republicans are okay with it. The majority of the Republicans are okay with that. That's what's troubling. And then you look at someone like Mitch McConnell this morning, and I wasn't expecting this. Mitch McConnell stepping down after Haley loses big time to Trump yesterday in Michigan. Maybe that was the writing on the wall to say, hey, I don't want to take the blame for the shutdown, for Trump, for any of that, for the decline of the Republican Party. I'm just going to step down and let the next group, the next generation, fight it out. And you look at the next generation of Republicans who are in line, they're not much better than Mitch McConnell. And if they don't take over, then you start looking at the other Republicans, the ones who ousted Kevin McCarthy, the ones who are giving, the latest Speaker Johnson a hard time. They're not interested in governing. They're not interested in passing anything. They're interested in chaos and in the fame of this kind of do-nothing politics. Because they're famous, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, all these guys, they mega famous, not mega famous, mega famous. And that's all. That's why they're in this game. Meanwhile, America suffers. So I heard one phrase today that really got me. And I heard some news guy say it. So he said the reward for being the adult in the room is ridicule. the reward for being the adult in the room is ridicule. It suddenly, and then you look at every institution, not just politics, every institution where the young are coming up and the older are getting booted out, and there are these generational shifts. Some are better than others, some are rockier than others, and you'll see this. And as an older person, you need some of us for stability. But some are saying, just cut the cord now. And as I said, it's happening throughout society. So I felt these seismic shifts over the last 24 hours. First Haley, then McConnell. And then I have to say, it didn't make me feel any better when I heard that Richard Lewis had passed. So on the day before Leap Day, tomorrow we get the extra day. So kind of mourn today, pray for a better tomorrow, and hopefully we'll get something out of the extra day to get us back on our feet. Anyway, I've got to do some rehearsal. For my Emil, Amok, lost NPR host, married to PETA, and other untold stories from the American Filipino life. I'm doing this show at the Fresno Rogue Festival. And as I said, I'm not saying this because I necessarily want you to drive to Fresno. Although, I mean, it's a very lovely place. Really, I mean that. I mean, as I said, where else can you get fresh raisins? Right there. Fresh raisins. Don't you want them older, Emil? The older raisins are the better ones, aren't they? Because, they're... All right, the good ones. Forget how old they are. The good ones. That's the same as people. We don't want the older politicians or the younger. We just want the good ones. Anyway, Saturday, March 2nd at 2 p.m. Saturday, March 2nd at 9:30 p.m. 2 shows, a doubleheader. Sunday, March 3rd at 2 p.m. Oh my God, what are they doing to you, Emil? Thursday, March 7th at 5:30 p.m. and Saturday, March 9th at 5 p.m. Get your tickets at roguefestival.ticketleap.com/Emil Amok Guillermo. Once again, Rogue, ROGUE Festival. So roguefestival.ticketleap.com/Emil Amok Guillermo. Get your tickets. I'll see you in Fresno at the Lotus Room. The Lotus Room, which is a nice little room, very intimate. 626 East Olive, right there in the at the corner where the cool coffee shop is, the big coffee shop in Fresno in the Tower District. So come see the show. Come see me in Fresno. If you're near. Like if you're in like Chicago, you might be. I'll figure out a way to get there. Certainly I'll be in New York in April, and I'll be in Orlando, Florida in May. So head to Fresno only if you happen to be in Merced. That's not such a bad drive. Anyway. All right. So we'll probably repeat this show Thursday and Friday. Maybe I'll do a special show from Fresno on Friday. Although I doubt I'd probably just repeat this show. God, I just can't believe Richard Lewis is gone. Although he prepared us. He said, I'm going through this thing. I'm going to retire from stand-up. I'm going to just do Curb. Thank goodness we have Curb. Good episode with him. in this season 12 that they've shown so far. Anyway, all right, that's it. I'm Emil Guillermo. Thank you for watching or listening. As you can see, I ought to put the ticket. Here's the ticket thing. If you're watching, I'm flipping the ticket link up there on YouTube. Check it out. I mean, if you're close, if you're in Fresno, and like I said, I'm still depressed about what's happening with our country. You know, what's happening with our leaders. Clearly, the leadership of both the Republicans and the Democrats have not prepared the next generation. I mean, I think that's a crazy thing. But, you know, I don't want to panic about this, because this too shall pass. New leaders will emerge. They have to. They have to. And we will get through this. We will. We have to. You know, I close with a little meditation, a little metta, M-E-T-T-A, metta, which is loving kindness. That helps. That helps relieve some of the pressure and the anxiety. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time, mahal kita.